I wish I could tell you I saw it coming, that I noticed the red flags, that I was smart enough to dodge the disaster that was Sophia before it ever touched my life. But I didn't. I walked into that marriage blind, convinced I was making the best decision of my life. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not the betrayal, not the court battle, not the smug boyfriend, but the fact that, once upon a time, I genuinely believed I had it all. Sophia and I met 7 years ago. It wasn't one of those whirlwind romances where you get lost in passion overnight. No, it was slow, steady, the kind of relationship that felt solid, dependable. We dated for 2 years before tying the knot. And when I proposed, I did it with my whole heart. Not a single hesitation. Back then, I had no doubts about her. None. She was sweet, lively, the kind of woman who made conversations flow effortlessly. She had this charm that made people like her within minutes. My parents adored her. My mother, Linda, loved that she was always up for girl talk over coffee. My dad, Paul, appreciated that she could sit through a football game and act interested. That should have been my first warning sign. She was too good at playing a role, too smooth at winning people over. The only one who wasn't completely fooled? My sister, Claire. She was skeptical from the start. Not in a loud, overbearing way, but in those subtle, quiet observations that I chose to ignore. She likes nice things, Nathan, Claire once said. Too much. The way she talks about money, about what she wants from life. It's not about building together. It's about getting what she thinks she deserves. I laughed her off, because I love Sophia, and love makes you stupid. Sophia worked part-time at a boutique before we got married. Nothing serious, just a job she took for extra spending money. But after the wedding, that job disappeared. She said she needed time to figure herself out. Whatever that meant, I was fine with it at first. I had a solid job in real estate sales. I wasn't rolling in millions, but I could afford a comfortable life. I had already bought a house before we got married, a modest but nice place. My father co-signed the loan to help with interest rates, but I made every single payment. That house? It was mine. Not ours. Mine. I didn't say it out loud at the time because I didn't think it mattered. I was married. What was mine was hers, right? That was my second mistake. For the first few months, everything felt normal. Sophia played the role of a loving wife well. She'd cook sometimes, though she preferred takeout. She'd do the laundry, though she often complained about how tiring it was. She acted like she was contributing, but really, she was just existing in a home that I paid for, living a life I provided. I ignored the small signs. How she'd always talk about wanting a bigger house, a nicer car, a vacation to Europe, things that didn't fit our actual budget. How she'd get irritated when I reminded her that I was the only one working. How she'd scoff when I'd suggest she think about going back to work. I'm not going to take just any job, Nathan. I want to find something that makes me happy. Fair enough. But months turned into a year. A year turned into 2. And somehow, she never found that mythical job that would bring her fulfillment. At first, I thought it was just a phase. I told myself she'd come around, that she just needed time. Because that's what a good husband does, right? He supports his wife. He trusts her. But there was always that nagging feeling. That tiny voice in the back of my head whispering, she's not looking for a career. She's looking for an easy life. Then, little by little, the changes started. She stopped being as affectionate. She started going out more often. At first, it was occasional, lunches with friends, shopping trips. Then it became late nights, unexplained outings. I just need space, she'd say. You're acting like I have to be glued to you 24/7. I wasn't. I just wanted to know why my wife suddenly needed so much space. It was Claire who saw it first. Something's off, Nathan. She's distracted, like she's mentally checked out of this marriage. Are you sure everything's okay? I lied. I told her things were fine. Because, deep down, I didn't want to admit that maybe she was right. The first real gut punch came one night when Sophia came home at 2 a.m. I was waiting in the living room. I wasn't angry. I wasn't accusing her of anything. I just wanted answers. Where were you? I asked. She froze. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see the truth flash across her face. Then she flipped. Are you seriously waiting up for me? Am I not allowed to have a life outside of this house? You're so paranoid, Nathan. It's suffocating. She stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door, leaving me sitting there, staring at the spot where she'd been standing. Something shifted that night. It was like I had been sleepwalking through my own marriage, and suddenly, I was wide awake. But I still wasn't ready to face the truth. Not yet. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. No apology. No explanation. She kissed my cheek, made coffee, and scrolled through her phone like she hadn't just gaslit me into questioning my own sanity the night before. I let it go, because that's what I always did. And that was my biggest mistake. I didn't know it then, but that moment, the one where I let her rewrite reality, where I let her convince me that I was the problem, that was the beginning of the end. Not the night I found the texts. Not the divorce battle. Not the judge's final ruling. No, the real destruction started the moment I stopped trusting myself. And once you lose that, you've already lost everything. You ever have one of those moments where you feel like the ground beneath you isn't as solid as you thought? Like you've been standing on what you assumed was rock, only to realize it's quicksand, pulling you under inch by inch? That's what the next phase of my marriage felt like. At first, it was subtle. Little things that were easy to dismiss, easy to explain away. Maybe she was just in a mood. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But then, the little things became bigger things. Sophia started going out more often. At first, it was normal, grabbing lunch with friends, going shopping, the kind of stuff she had always done. But then, the outings started lasting longer. It was just a late dinner, she'd say. You're acting like I was out all night. Except sometimes, she was out all night. It started with excuses. I had too much to drink, so I crashed at Hannah's place. Or, it was just a girls' night, nothing serious. And the first few times, I let it go. Because that's what you do when you trust someone, right? But then came the night she didn't come home at all. No call, no text, nothing. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for my phone to buzz. It didn't. The next morning, just as the sun was rising, the front door creaked open. I got up, walked to the living room, and there she was, hair messy, makeup smudged, wearing the same clothes she had left in. Where were you? I asked, my voice flat. She barely glanced at me as she kicked off her heels. I told you, I was with friends. Why are you making this a big deal? Because you didn't come home, Sophia. She sighed, rubbing her temples like I was the problem. Like I was the one being unreasonable. I just needed some space, Nathan. You act like I owe you a minute-by-minute breakdown of my life. And that was the first time I felt it, the cold distance. Like she wasn't my wife anymore. Like she was already somewhere else, mentally, emotionally. Like I was talking to a stranger who happened to be wearing my wife's face. And yet, I still didn't call it what it was. Not yet. My sister, Claire, saw it before I did. She's acting different, Nathan. She's just been stressed, I muttered. No, Claire said, shaking her head. She's checked out. She doesn't look at you the same way anymore. I hated hearing it, but deep down, I knew Claire was right. The problem was, I wasn't ready to admit it yet. Instead, I tried harder. I planned date nights. She canceled them. I tried talking to her. She brushed me off. I asked if she was okay. She rolled her eyes. Every effort I made was met with indifference. And the worst part? She didn't even pretend to care. One night, I was scrolling through social media when I saw a photo tagged from a bar downtown. It was Sophia, smiling, holding a cocktail. Her caption? Living my best life. What caught my attention wasn't the post itself, but the people in the background. One guy, tall, dark-haired, was standing way too close to her. His hand was on the small of her back, fingers just slightly grazing the fabric of her dress. It was an intimate touch, not one you give to a friend. My stomach clenched. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. I debated calling her, texting her, confronting her. But then I realized something. I was afraid of the answer. Because if I asked, if I forced the truth out of her, then I had to do something about it. And I wasn't ready for that yet. So, I put my phone down. And for the first time in my life, I felt helpless. The final straw came 2 weeks later. It was 2 a.m. again. I was sitting in the living room, waiting, just like before. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was just tired. When Sophia finally walked in, she froze. She wasn't expecting me to be awake. That's when I knew. Because guilt? Guilt is a weird thing. It shows up in the smallest, quickest moments, a flicker of the eyes, a half-second of hesitation, and I saw it all over her face. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice calm. She dropped her purse on the counter, sighing dramatically. "Nathan, can we not do this?" "Do what?" "This interrogation every time I go out. It's exhausting." "It's exhausting?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You disappear all night, and I'm the exhausting one?" She scoffed. Not even a trace of guilt anymore. Just irritation. "I don't have to explain myself to you." And that was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not in anger. Not in sadness. Just clarity. Because I finally understood. She wasn't here anymore. And she wasn't coming back. That night, after she went to bed, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the walls, replaying every moment in my head. Every excuse, every lie, every shift in her behavior. The woman I married? She didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. And for the first time, I stopped trying to fix it. I just sat there, accepting what I had refused to see for so long. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was just a waiting game. Waiting for the truth to surface. Waiting for her to finally admit it. Waiting for everything to fall apart completely. I didn't know how much worse it was going to get. But I knew one thing for sure. The woman sleeping in my bed? She wasn't my wife anymore. She was just a stranger wearing a ring she no longer cared about. And I was just a man too tired to keep pretending. You know how people say that when something terrible happens, you can feel it in your gut before you even see the proof? That's exactly what it was like. I knew Sophia was cheating before I ever saw the texts. I just didn't want to believe it. I had spent months watching her pull away, treating me like an inconvenience rather than a husband. I had spent sleepless nights waiting for her to come home, asking questions she refused to answer, being made to feel like a paranoid fool for even wondering what was happening. But deep down, I already knew. And then, one day, I had proof. It was a Sunday morning. She was in the shower, steam pouring from the bathroom like nothing in the world was wrong. And her phone? It was sitting on the kitchen counter, unlocked. Now, I know what people say. Never go through your partner's phone. If you have to check, you've already lost trust. Yeah, well, trust had left this marriage a long time ago. So I picked it up. I didn't even have to scroll. The first name at the top of her messages? Brandon. Not Hannah, not Julie, not any of the so-called girlfriends she was always out with. No, Brandon. And the moment I clicked on that thread, my stomach twisted into a knot so tight I thought I might actually throw up. The messages weren't even subtle. There were pictures, ones I can never unsee. There were texts describing things she would never say to me, things she clearly enjoyed doing for him. There was a back-and-forth conversation planning their next night together. While I had been home alone, wondering if my wife was okay, I felt sick. Not just because of what I was reading, but because of what it confirmed. This wasn't some recent mistake. This wasn't an impulsive one-time thing. This had been going on for months. While I was waiting up for her. While I was trying to fix things. While I was still fighting for a marriage she had already abandoned. I put the phone down, walked to the sink, gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. And then, I took a deep breath. Because I had a choice to make. I could confront her right there and then, storm into the bathroom, throw her phone at the wall, demand an explanation I already knew she'd never give. Or, I could play the long game. I could be smart. I waited. Not for long. Just until she walked out of the bathroom, hair wrapped in a towel, humming like nothing was wrong. I was sitting at the dining table, arms crossed, staring at her phone. She noticed immediately. And she froze. Right there. That split second of hesitation? That was the moment she knew. That was the moment she realized the game was up. "What?" she asked, forcing a casual smile. I tapped her phone. "Who's Brandon?" I'll never forget the way her entire face changed. Gone was the casual smirk. Gone was the attitude. the dismissiveness. Gone was the carefully constructed image she had built. And for just a second, she looked scared. Not sad. Not guilty. Scared. Then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. And just like that, she flipped the script. Oh my God, Nathan. Are you seriously going through my phone? Not an apology. Not an explanation. No. She was offended. She actually had the audacity to be angry at me. That's a complete invasion of my privacy, she continued, voice rising. How dare you? How dare I? How dare I? I laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. That's what you're worried about? Not the fact that you've been screwing some other guy, but the fact that I found out? Her expression twisted into something ugly. Oh, don't be dramatic. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. Dramatic? I echoed, my voice dangerously calm. You're cheating on me. But I'm the dramatic one? She rolled her eyes. She actually rolled her eyes. We were falling apart anyway, Nathan. Be honest. You knew that. I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. So that's your excuse? I asked. You felt things were off, so instead of talking to me, you just went and found someone else? She shrugged. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I needed more than what this marriage was giving me. That's when I knew. This wasn't salvageable. There was no coming back from this. So I did the only thing I could do. I stepped aside and pointed at the door. Get out. She scoffed. Seriously? You're kicking me out over one mistake? I smiled. I don't think I had ever smiled so coldly in my entire life. One mistake? I repeated. I saw the messages, Sophia. I saw how long this has been going on. It wasn't one mistake. It was a choice. Over and over again. And now I'm making mine. She hesitated for a second. I could see it. She thought she could talk her way out of this. She thought she could manipulate me, the way she had for months. But not this time. I was done. She grabbed her phone, stormed past me, and disappeared into the bedroom. I heard drawers opening, the sound of her shoving clothes into a bag. Then, minutes later, she walked past me again. Her face unreadable, her bag slung over her shoulder. At the door, she turned. You're going to regret this. I didn't even flinch. No, I said. I'm finally free. And then she was gone. The door clicked shut. And for the first time in months, the house felt quiet. Not empty. Not broken. Just quiet. Because for the first time, I wasn't drowning in uncertainty. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for answers that would never come. For the first time, I knew exactly where I stood. I was done. And the real war was just about to begin. If I thought the worst was over after Sophia walked out that door, I was wrong. So wrong. Because leaving wasn't enough for her. No. She wanted to destroy me on her way out. I expected anger. I expected backlash. Hell, I expected her to try and twist things in her favor. What I didn't expect was how fast she moved. Less than a week after she left, I got a letter from a lawyer. Sophia had filed for divorce. Not a mutual, clean split. A full-on war declaration. The demands? Insane. She wanted half of my house, the house I bought before the marriage. Half of my savings. Money she had never contributed to. Half of my car's value. Even though the car was paid off long before I met her. Monthly spousal support. Because, according to her, she had sacrificed her career for our marriage. And the kicker? Her new boyfriend, Brandon, was sitting beside her at mediation, smirking like he had just won the lottery. I wish I could say I kept my cool. That I walked into that room calm, confident, untouchable. But no. When I saw her sitting there with him, acting like they were some power couple about to bleed me dry, I almost lost it. My lawyer, Jacob, must have sensed it because he leaned in and whispered, "Breathe. We're going to shut this down." And for the first time since this nightmare started, I trusted someone else to fight for me. Because I wasn't just going to roll over and let them take everything I worked for. The first mediation session was a joke. Sophia played the helpless victim. I gave up my career for our marriage, she sniffled, dabbing at non-existent tears. Jacob calmly laid out the truth. Your Honor, my client's wife quit her job before the wedding. She made a personal choice not to seek employment for years, despite encouragement. My client provided for the household entirely on his own. She was not a stay-at-home spouse managing a home or children. There are no children involved. She simply did not work. The mediator nodded. Point for us. Sophia glared at me, realizing this wasn't going to be as easy as she thought. Brandon? Still smirking. He actually leaned over and whispered to her, loud enough for me to hear. We got this, babe. He'll have to pay up. I clenched my jaw. Jacob? Didn't even flinch. Your Honor, he continued, flipping through papers. Regarding the house, we have the purchase agreement and mortgage records proving my client bought it before the marriage. Under state law, premarital assets are separate property unless commingled, which this was not. Sophia's lawyer tried to argue. Tried. He made mortgage payments during the marriage, making it joint property, the guy pushed. Jacob raised an eyebrow. With whose income? Only my client's. And all payments came from an account in his name alone. Boom. Case law backed us. Sophia's lawyer looked visibly uncomfortable. Sophia, meanwhile, was seething. Then came the savings battle. Sophia's argument? I contributed emotionally to this marriage. That counts for something. Even the mediator blinked at that one. Jacob, flipping through another document. We have account records showing that throughout the marriage, the wife withdrew money but never deposited a single cent. There is no legal precedent for claiming half of savings she never contributed to. Another point for us. Brandon, still sitting there, acting like a king, waiting to collect his share of my money. And that's when something clicked. This wasn't just about Sophia getting paid. This was about them getting rich together. They thought they had played the system. They thought I was just another guy who would get screwed over in court. They underestimated me. The next session, Sophia turned up the dramatics. She cried. She played the devastated ex-wife. I have nowhere to go, she said, voice trembling. Which was funny, considering she was literally living with Brandon. Jacob, calm as ever. Your Honor, we have evidence that the wife has been cohabiting with another man, which is relevant to the spousal support request. And then, we dropped the bomb. I handed Jacob screenshots of Brandon's texts to me. The one where he mocked me. The one where he bragged about taking my money. The mediator read them aloud. Sophia's lawyer? Looked like he wanted to disappear. The mediator looked at Sophia and Brandon for a long moment. Then she sighed. Given the circumstances, I strongly recommend that the wife reconsider her demands, as they are unlikely to succeed in court. Brandon's smirk? Gone. Sophia's face? Priceless. They thought they were entitled to my money. They thought the system would hand it to them. They thought wrong. Mediation failed. Sophia refused to settle, so the case moved to court. But by that point, we had already won. Jacob had every piece of evidence lined up. Proof that I bought the house before the marriage. Proof that she never contributed financially. Proof that she had another financial provider, Brandon. Proof that she and Brandon were counting on my money to fund their future. The judge? Not impressed with their act. Sophia? Starting to panic. Brandon? No longer smirking. And me? For the first time since this started, I felt calm, because I finally saw how this was going to end. Not with me losing everything. Not with them walking away with my money. But with justice. And when that final ruling came, oh, it was going to be beautiful. You ever meet someone so cocky, so convinced of their own victory, that they don't even consider the possibility of losing? That was Brandon. He strutted around like he had already won. Like he was just waiting for the court to hand him my life on a silver platter. And the worst part? He wasn't even subtle about it. The first time he directly mocked me was right after the mediation failed. Sophia and her lawyer were scrambling to adjust their strategy, clearly realizing that things weren't going as planned. But Brandon? He was still laughing. Still acting like this was some game he was winning. That night, I got a message from him. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Why the hell would this guy be messaging me? But when I opened it, my hands clenched into fists. The text read, "Man, I almost feel bad for you. Almost. You really thought you were gonna walk away clean? LOL. Guess who's about to start house shopping? Thanks for funding our future." I stared at the message, heart pounding. Not from anger. Not from fear. From something colder. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. A deep, quiet resolve. I didn't respond, because he wasn't worth it. But I did something better. I screenshot the text and sent it to my lawyer, Jacob. He called me back immediately. He sent you this? Directly? Yep, I said, voice flat. Jacob let out a low chuckle. Oh, he just made my job a whole lot easier. See, the thing about arrogance is that it makes you sloppy. Brandon thought he was untouchable, thought the court was just going to blindly side with Sophia. He underestimated two things: the law, me. Because while he was texting me like an idiot, I was building my case. Over the next few weeks, Brandon kept running his mouth. He made comments during court proceedings. I can't wait to see the check clear. Hey, maybe we'll invite you to the housewarming party. He whispered to Sophia during breaks. Don't worry, babe. This loser can't stop us. He even made snide remarks to Jacob. Hope you're charging this guy extra, 'cause he's just wasting his money. And the worst part? He really believed it. He genuinely thought they were about to get half my house, half my savings, and endless support checks. It wasn't just about winning for him. It was about rubbing it in my face. Then came the final hearing. The one where the judge would decide everything. That morning, I barely slept. I kept replaying every court session, every argument, every time Brandon smirked at me like he had already won. But instead of fear, instead of anxiety, I felt ready, because I knew what was coming. Walking into the courthouse, I saw them waiting by the entrance. Sophia in a sleek black dress, playing the grieving, wronged woman. Brandon standing beside her, smug as ever. He caught my eye, grinned. Hope you brought your checkbook, he said under his breath as I passed. I didn't respond, didn't even flinch, because soon, that smirk was going to disappear. Court was in session. The judge, stern, no nonsense, not in the mood for games. Jacob, calm, composed, ready. Sophia's lawyer, already sweating. And Brandon, still leaning back like he was watching a comedy show. Then the evidence was presented. First, the house. Mortgage documents proving I bought it before the marriage. Records showing that every payment came from my account, not joint funds. The judge nodded. Premarital asset, not subject to division. Sophia stiffened. Brandon's grin faltered. Next, the savings. Bank statements showing I funded the entire account. Withdrawal records proving Sophia took money, but never deposited any. The judge nodded again. No basis for equal division. The petitioner retains full rights to this account. Brandon's smirk was gone. Then came the bombshell. Jacob handed the judge a stack of papers. Screenshots of Brandon's text to me. Brandon, gloating about the money. Brandon, openly admitting they were planning to take everything. Brandon, mocking the entire legal process. The judge's eyes darkened. He looked up, straight at Sophia. Mrs. Reynolds, he said, voice sharp, are you aware of these messages? Sophia's face turned pale. She didn't know. Your Honor, yes or no? Silence. Then, no, I didn't know. But it was too late. The damage was done. Brandon had ruined her case. The final ruling? Sophia got nothing from the house. Sophia got nothing from my savings. Sophia got a small settlement to transition into her new life, but far less than what she expected. Spousal support? Minimal. And only for a short period. And the best part? The judge cited Brandon's texts as evidence of financial manipulation. Meaning? Brandon's own arrogance had cost them everything. When the session ended, everyone stood up. I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. Sophia looked stunned. Brandon? Furious. As I walked past, he turned to me. This isn't over, he hissed. I smiled. No, Brandon, I said, voice calm. It's over for you. And then, I walked out, a free man. The morning of the final hearing, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Not because I knew the outcome. No, that was still up in the air. But because this was the last step. After today, no more court dates. No more legal battles. No more Sophia and Brandon treating my life like a cash machine. Whatever happened, I'd walk out of that courtroom free. And that was enough. Walking into the courthouse, I saw them immediately. Sophia and Brandon. She looked tense, clutching a folder like it held all the power in the world. Brandon, still smirking. still convinced this was a done deal. As I passed, he leaned in. "Hope you're ready to pay up, champ," he whispered. I didn't stop walking, didn't even acknowledge him, because today, he wasn't my problem. Inside, the judge took his seat, straight-faced. No nonsense. This was it. My lawyer, Jacob, gave me a slight nod. He was ready. Sophia's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, my client has suffered significant financial hardship due to this divorce. She sacrificed her career to support the marriage, and she is entitled to a fair division of assets." I almost laughed. Sacrificed her career? She quit before we got married and never looked back. Jacob stood. "Your Honor, we have submitted evidence that the petitioner did not work before or during the marriage. Additionally, we have documented financial records proving that my client paid for the mortgage, utilities, and all living expenses alone. There was no joint contribution to these assets." The judge flipped through the documents. Sophia's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Sophia avoided eye contact. The judge finally looked up. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, voice measured, "can you provide any documentation proving that you contributed financially to these assets?" A pause. A long, awkward pause. Sophia's throat bobbed as she swallowed. "Well, I supported him in other ways," she finally said. The judge didn't react. He simply turned to Jacob. "Counselor, let's proceed." Jacob moved to the next attack. "Your Honor, we also have documented evidence that the petitioner has been cohabiting with another man, Brandon Carter, since leaving the marital home. This is relevant to the request for spousal support." The judge turned to Sophia again. "Is this true?" Her lips parted slightly. For the first time, she looked nervous. I have a right to move on," she said finally. The judge nodded. "Of course, but it does impact the request for financial support. If you are living with another partner who provides financial assistance, it reduces the necessity of spousal maintenance." Translation? She had just shot herself in the foot. Then, Jacob pulled out the final dagger. The texts. Brandon's texts. The judge read them silently at first. Then, out loud. "I can't believe you're such a sucker, man. Thanks for setting us up. Hope you brought your checkbook." Sophia's face drained of color. "Brandon?" His smirk vanished. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Reynolds, were you aware that Mr. Carter was making these statements about your divorce proceedings?" Sophia shifted in her seat. "No, Your Honor," she mumbled. "Then let me ask you plainly. Was this divorce filed with the intention of securing financial benefits for both you and Mr. Carter?" She didn't answer. Which, really, was an answer. The ruling came fast. The house? Mine. The savings? Untouched. Spousal support? Minimal and temporary. The judge closed his folder. The court finds that the petitioner is not entitled to the requested asset division due to lack of financial contribution. Additionally, given the evidence provided, the court reduces the original spousal support request significantly. Then, the final blow. "Mr. Reynolds, you are free to go." I took a slow breath. It was over. Sophia? Looked shell-shocked. Brandon? Fuming. As I stood to leave, Sophia finally turned to me. "You're really just going to walk away?" she snapped, voice low. I met her gaze. Calm. Steady. "I already did," I said. Then, I turned my back for the last time. Outside the courtroom, my father was waiting. The moment he saw me, he broke into a grin. "That's my boy." Jacob shook my hand. That, he said, was one of the most satisfying wins I've had in a while. And me? I just stood there, taking it all in. I was free. No more games. No more manipulation. No more waking up every day wondering when the next betrayal would come. Sophia and Brandon thought they had beaten me, thought they could take what was mine. But in the end, they lost. And I walked away with everything I had earned. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole again. I don't know what I expected to feel after walking out of that courtroom. Relief? Joy? Maybe some kind of cinematic moment where I'd stand in the sunlight, take a deep breath, and suddenly feel like a new man. Yeah, that didn't happen. The truth? I just felt tired. Tired from months of fighting. Tired of carrying the weight of a marriage that had been dead long before I ever admitted it to myself. tired of watching Sophia and Brandon act like they were entitled to everything I had built. But beneath all that exhaustion, buried deep under the bruises of a battle I never asked for, there was peace. I drove straight to my parents' house after court. I needed to see them. When I pulled into the driveway, my dad, Paul, was already standing on the porch, arms crossed, grinning. "You did it," he said as soon as I stepped out of the car. "Yeah," I exhaled. "It's over." He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Knew you'd win. Never doubted you for a second." That made one of us. Inside, my mom, Linda, was waiting with coffee, like she already knew. And then there was my sister, Claire. She had been my biggest supporter through this whole thing, and judging by the way she was pacing the kitchen, she was more eager for details than anyone else. "Tell me everything," she demanded, eyes practically glowing. So I did. Told them about the ruling, about Brandon's texts backfiring spectacularly, about the moment Sophia realized she was walking away with nothing. When I finished, Claire let out a victorious yell. "Oh my God, I wish I was there to see her face." My mom sighed, shaking her head. "I still can't believe she thought she'd get away with this." My dad, laughing. "That idiot boyfriend of hers played himself," he said. "And she had the nerve to bring him to court? What a joke." I finally smiled. Because, yeah, it was a joke. And now, I was finally done playing. But Sophia? She wasn't done. Not even close. 3 days after the ruling, I started hearing rumors. Apparently, Sophia was telling everyone the judge was biased. He only sided with Nathan because he had a good lawyer. It wasn't fair. The system is broken. And the best one? He manipulated the evidence. Because, text messages from her boyfriend's own phone weren't real enough. But the kicker? Brandon was furious. He had counted on my money. He and Sophia had already started making plans with money they never actually had. Talking about investments. Looking at apartments. Brandon even quit his job, thinking they'd be set. And now? They were broke. One of my friends, Adam, who still ran in the same circles as Sophia, called me. "Man, you won't believe this," he said, barely holding back laughter. "Try me. Sophia's miserable. Brandon is freaking out. He really thought you were gonna hand them your house on a silver platter." I just chuckled. Because, honestly, they deserved it. They made their bed. They planned their little scheme. They walked into that courtroom thinking they had already won. And now, they were facing the consequences. The first time I ran into Sophia after the ruling, it wasn't planned. I was at a coffee shop, just grabbing my usual order, when I heard her voice behind me. "Nathan?" I turned, and there she was. Alone. No Brandon. No smug grin. No fake courtroom tears. Just Sophia. She looked different. Not in a sad way. Not even in a regretful way. Just defeated. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She hesitated for a second. Then, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. Because, really, what was left to say? After everything? After the betrayal? The lies? The legal battle? After her standing next to another man, laughing at me in court, thinking she was about to walk away with half my life? What could she possibly have to say now? I didn't expect it to end like this," she finally said. I raised an eyebrow. "How exactly did you expect it to end?" She didn't have an answer. Because she had never considered losing. Sophia had always assumed she'd win. She had never imagined a version of this story where she walked away with nothing. But here we were. "Look," I said, sighing. "I don't hate you, Sophia. I really don't. But I'm done. You made your choices, and I made mine. And now we both live with them." Her lips pressed together. For a second, I almost thought she was going to apologize. Almost. But in the end, she just nodded. And then, she walked away. For the first time in a long time, it actually felt like closure. Not because she apologized. Not because she regretted it. But because I finally realized I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not answers. Not explanations. Not revenge. Nothing. I had already won. People assume divorce always ends with one side broken and bitter. And maybe, in some cases, that's true. But for me, it ended with freedom. Sure, I walked away with my house, my money, my dignity. But the real victory? Walking away with my peace. There's a certain kind of satisfaction that comes from watching people get exactly what they deserve. Not in a petty way. Not in a revenge-driven kind of way. Just pure, unfiltered karma. And let me tell you, Sophia and Brandon, they got a full dose. After the final ruling, their reality hit them hard. No house, no savings, no long-term spousal support. Just whatever scraps Sophia had left, and a boyfriend who had been banking on my money to keep their lifestyle going. I didn't have to go looking for updates. They found their way to me. A week after the ruling, I got a text from Claire. Claire, check out what just popped up in my feed. Attached was a screenshot from a mutual acquaintance's post. It was Sophia, at a diner, waiting tables. I stared at the picture for a long moment, letting it sink in. This was the same woman who had once laughed in my face when I suggested she get a job. The same woman who swore she'd never do anything beneath her. And now? She was working double shifts just to get by. But it got better. The next text from Claire? Even better. Claire, Brandon's back at his old job. The one he quit because he thought he'd be rich off your divorce. LMAO. I actually laughed out loud. Because of course he was. Of course Brandon had to crawl back to whatever dead-end job he thought he was too good for. This was a guy who had quit his job before the court ruling. Why? Because he was so sure I was going to be paying for his life. And now? He was back at square one. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. The best part? People started turning on them. Because here's the thing. When people think you're about to get rich, they stay close. But when you lose everything, they scatter. Sophia's friends? Gone. Brandon's buddies? Nowhere to be found. People who once cheered them on, mocked me behind my back, and acted like I was some sucker who was about to lose it all? Silent. It was like watching a kingdom collapse overnight. They had built their future on a fantasy. And now? They were drowning in reality. A few weeks later, I ran into an old coworker, Adam, who used to be friends with Brandon. Dude, he said, shaking his head. You wouldn't believe the meltdown that guy had. Oh. I leaned in, amused. Man, after the court ruling, he went off on Sophia, screaming about how she ruined everything, how this wasn't what he signed up for. I raised an eyebrow. So, what? He thought she was just gonna hand him my money? Adam shrugged. Pretty much. He legit told people he was set for life. Now, he's stuck in a tiny apartment, broke as hell, and pissed that Sophia can't support him. I shook my head, smirking. Brandon thought he was playing the game. Instead, he got played. Then came the final twist. Sophia. Calling me. I was sitting at home, finally enjoying my peace, when my phone buzzed. I glanced down. Her name flashed across the screen. I just stared at it. Because why? Why would she be calling me? I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then, finally, I picked up. Silence. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in a quiet voice, Nathan? I exhaled slowly. What do you want, Sophia? She hesitated. I don't know. I wanted to talk. I leaned back, rubbing my temple. About what? Everything, I guess. I didn't think things would turn out like this. I closed my eyes. Because that's what it always was with her. Never an apology. Never ownership of her mistakes. Just regret that she lost. Sophia, I said finally, what exactly do you want me to say? She was quiet for a second. Then, I thought maybe we could be friends. I let out a slow, dry chuckle. Friends? She swallowed. I don't know. Sophia. I cut her off. The last time we were in the same room, you were trying to take half of everything I owned. Your boyfriend was laughing about how they were going to spend my money. And now, because it didn't work out, you want to talk? She exhaled sharply. It's not like that, she said. Then what's it like? Another pause. Then, finally, I don't know. And that was the most honest thing she had ever said. Because Sophia never knew what she wanted. She wanted comfort, but without effort. She wanted money, but without work. She wanted security, but only if someone else provided it. And now that her plan had crashed and burned, she had no idea what to do next. Not my problem. Look, I said finally, I don't hate you, Sophia, but we're not friends. We were never friends. And honestly, I'm good. I don't need this conversation." She sighed. "Yeah," she murmured. "I figured you'd say that." Then she hung up, and I smiled, because, for the first time, I realized something. I had won long before the court ruling, not because I kept my house, not because I kept my money, not because I avoided paying for their fantasy life, but because I moved on. And Sophia? She never would. People like Sophia and Brandon never change. They never take responsibility. They just blame everyone else for their downfall. But the truth? They did this to themselves. They played dirty. They thought they had it all figured out. They laughed in my face. And now? They were struggling to survive while I thrived. Justice? It doesn't always come in courtrooms. Sometimes, it comes in watching people self-destruct under the weight of their own choices. And that was the real victory. There's something strange about rebuilding your life after a storm. For so long, I had been in survival mode, waiting for the next betrayal, the next legal battle, the next smug grin from Brandon as he planned his future with my money. But now, the storm had passed, and all that was left was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that makes you uneasy. The kind of quiet that tells you, you're finally free. It took time for that feeling to settle in. At first, I still woke up expecting to fight, to check emails from my lawyer, to prepare for another court date, to brace myself for some last-minute trick from Sophia. But none of it came. Instead, I woke up, I made coffee, and for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's mess. It was just me. And that was enough. I started making changes. Not big, dramatic ones. Just small things that reminded me this was my life again. First, I redecorated. That house, the one Sophia once tried to take, it no longer had any trace of her. The old furniture? Gone. The framed wedding photos? Trashed. The cheap decorations she had insisted on? Burned in the fire pit out back. I replaced everything with things that felt like me. New couch. New art on the walls. A home that no longer whispered her presence every time I walked through the door. It was mine again. Completely. Then, I started living again. Not just existing. Actually living. I reconnected with old friends. People I had lost touch with because Sophia had pulled me away from them. The first time I went out for drinks with them, I realized something. I had spent so much time walking on eggshells, trying to keep Sophia happy, trying to be the perfect husband for someone who never really cared. Now, I could just be me. And for the first time in years, I remembered what that felt like. Then, I picked up my guitar again. Music had always been a passion of mine, but somewhere along the way, I had let it slip away. Sophia had never outright told me to stop playing, but she had always made it clear she didn't see the point. It's just a hobby, Nathan. Why waste your time? So I had let it go. Now, I picked it up again, and damn, it felt good. I started playing at a local bar on open mic nights. Not for money, not for attention, just because it made me happy. And after everything, I deserve to be happy. I also started working out again, not out of anger, not because I needed some revenge glow up, just because it felt good to take care of myself, to focus on my own body, my own health, my own confidence. There was something satisfying about looking in the mirror and seeing a man who had rebuilt himself, a man who had been burned down to the foundation and came back stronger. The real test came 2 months after the final ruling. I was at the grocery store, grabbing a few things when I turned down an aisle and there she was. Sophia. She was standing in front of the dairy section, staring blankly at a carton of eggs. For a second, she didn't notice me. Then, our eyes met. And just like that, time froze. I could see the moment it hit her. The realization of where she was, who she was looking at. For a second, she hesitated. Then, she took a slow step toward me. "Hey," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. I gave her a polite nod. Nothing more. She studied me, and I could see it in her eyes. She was expecting something. Anger. Bitterness. Some last, heated conversation where we rehashed everything that had happened. Instead, I just stood there, unbothered, free. "You look good," she said after a moment. Thanks, I replied, reaching for a loaf of bread and tossing it into my cart. More silence. How have you been? She asked. I shrugged. Good. Really good. And I meant it. Every single word. Sophia, on the other hand, she didn't look so good. She looked drained, like life had knocked her around in ways she hadn't expected. Brandon and I broke up, she blurted suddenly, watching my reaction. I didn't give her one. I figured, I said simply. She shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't who I thought he was. I gave her the smallest smirk. Yeah, I could have told you that. Another pause. She exhaled, crossing her arms. I miss you sometimes, you know? And there it was. The confession I knew was coming. I tilted my head slightly, considering her words. Then, I smiled. Not because I missed her, not because I wanted her back, but because, for the first time, I realized I felt nothing for her. No hate, no longing, no regrets, just nothing. Take care of yourself, Sophia, I said finally. Then, I grabbed my cart and walked away. That was the last time I ever saw her. No dramatic moment, no lingering emotions, no second thoughts. Just a man walking forward, leaving the past exactly where it belonged. And that was the real fresh start. When you lose yourself in a toxic relationship, it takes time to come back. It takes time to rediscover the things that make you happy. It takes time to remember who you were before they tried to break you. But when you do, when you finally step into that new life, one that's completely your own, there's no better feeling in the world. I don't think about Sophia anymore. I don't think about Brandon. I don't think about the battle I had to fight. Because it's over. And me? I'm standing on solid ground, moving forward, and never looking back.